Good morning, beloveds. We have a few announcements this morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln. I'm Mary Kay Stillwell, a member of the Board of Trustees. I want to offer a special welcome to those of you who are visiting for the first time. Now to the announcements. This week on Thursday, August 17th at 7, join us for the Antelope Park concert, the annual Antelope Park concert. We'll hear music and spoken word with Oscar, Bob, and the A Street Band. The concert's free and open to the public. Next Sunday, August 20th, is the all-church cleanup. After service, we will gather in the gallery to meet up with Mr. Clean to get our supplies and then divide and conquer. 2 weeks from today will be our annual in-gathering water service, which will kick off the new church year. Keep an eye on the Friday e-blasts for more information. And fourth and very important, we hope you will join us for coffee and conversation in the gallery following the service. Thank you.
Neither am I, and having it back there increases my capacity to trip over it backwards. Bob, you want me to introduce you in any way? Is there any name for your group this morning? We'll go ahead and get started. Okay. It's 1 minute till. Okay. We're in this interesting situation again where we have multiple blocks at multiple times. So, well, this is coming from Denver. That in France. Well, good morning and welcome, everybody. We're going to start this morning with music from member Mark Schiffler and our music director, Bob Fusen. If you like what you hear, please come on Thursday night. We'll talk about that later. Well, good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln on this Sunday morning. It is August 13th, 2023. My name is the Reverend Oscar Sinclair. I am joined in the chancel by our worship associate, Kelsey Burke. It is good to be together. We say, whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journeys, whomever you love, whatever your age, whatever your skin color, whatever brings you into this room this morning, know that this is a place of welcome, a place of sanctuary, and I hope a place of deep joy and laughter on Sunday morning. It is good to be together. We say that the Unitarian Church of Lincoln is a loving community uniting reason with spiritual exploration to transform ourselves and the world. And vision looks like a lot of different things at different times. This morning, it's going to look like this: a highly caffeinated pastor who does not know what he's going to say yet. We haven't done this in a little while, so just to review. So this is going to be what's called a question box sermon. This is a old tradition in Unitarianism, and I think Universalism as well. But how it's going to work is this. When you came in, you should have gotten one of these. If you did not, you can make yourself known, and the ushers will bring you an index card. I think we need at least one up here. All right. So in the next few minutes, between now and when the story finishes, I'm going to ask that you write down a question on this index card, a question for me on this index card. When we take up the collection, we'll also collect all of these questions. And then I'll have about 10 minutes to sort through them and figure out in what order I want to answer them. And then the sermon will be done extemporaneously based on the questions that have arisen through this group. I have also drank 4 cups of coffee this morning for this task. And a Monster. So we'll see how it goes. It'll be fun. Yeah. As a reminder, because it has been a little while, usually when we do this, we get more questions than there is time to answer. So 2 things that you should know. One is that one of the reasons that we do this is it often generates really, really good sermon ideas that don't fit in a 5-minute answer here, but do fit for a 20-minute sermon in October. So if you don't hear your question answered, that may be why. The other thing is, if you have a question and you have a burning desire to get it answered, please put your name on the card, because if we don't get to it this morning, that'll be my cue to follow up with you to see what's going on. All right. Any questions? There should be a lot of questions. A lot of questions. But write them down. Yes. All right. With that, I will hand it over for our chalice lighting, and I will get out of the way. Oh. If you're on the live stream, write your questions in the chat. I will put them on a card, and they'll go in the pile.
Our chalice reading this morning comes from Dr. Dasher Kelter, who is a psychology professor at UC Berkeley. I've adapted passages from his latest book, which is called Awe, The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. These passages are written in the first person by Dr. Kelter. San Quentin State Prison is a level 2 prison located on San Francisco Bay. It houses 4,500 prisoners, the men in blue, including those sentenced to execution in California. In 2016, I first visited inside to give a talk as part of an inmate-led restorative justice program, which served 200 men. On the night before my first visit, I looked over the instructions for visitors. Wear greens, beiges, browns, and grays, colors with no ties to gangs and which correctional officers can easily distinguish from the blues that prisoners wear should things get out of hand. Don't touch the inmates, no drugs, don't bring weapons. Thinking of the talk I planned to give, I had the sudden gnawing sense that awe was irrelevant to the men in blue. It might even be an offense, the product of the myopia and tone deafness of my white privilege. Of what matter is awe to people with life sentences, living 20 hours a day in a 9 by 12-foot cell? 15 minutes into my talk, I asked, "What gives you guys awe?" And then I waited. After a second or two, here is what I heard. My daughter, visitors from the outside, singing in the church band, the air, Jesus, my cellie, the light outside the yard, reading the Quran, learning how to read, RJ at SQ, today. It is a myth that awe is rarefied, reserved for when we have enough wealth to enjoy loves of taste and culture. The responses of the men in blue tell us this is so. We can find awe anywhere. Doing so doesn't require money or the burning of fossil fuels or even much time. Our research suggests that just a couple of minutes a day will do, because we have a basic need for awe wired into our brains and bodies. Finding awe is easy if we just take a moment and wonder. Because all of us, no matter what our background, can find our own meaningful path to awe. Because brief moments of awe are as good for your mind and body as anything you might do. So how can we live the good life? One enlivened by joy and community and meaning that bring us a sense of worth and belonging and strengthens the people and natural environments around us? I have an answer. Find awe. If you'll now join me and stand, if you are able, to sing our first hymn. It's in the gray hymnal number 298, Wake Now My Senses. If you are young or young at heart, you're welcome to come to the front to join for our Time for All Ages this morning, which is a book called, is this your book, Ailish? This is Ailish's book called Rosie Revere, Engineer. This is the story of Rosie Revere, who dreamed of becoming a great engineer. In Lila Greer's classroom at Blue River Creek, young Rosie sat shyly, not daring to speak. But when no one saw her, she peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer's stash. And late, late at night, Rosie rolled up her sleeves and built in her hideaway under the eaves. Alone in her attic, the moon high above, dear Rosie made gadgets and gizmos she loved. And when she grew sleepy, she hid her machines far under the bed where they'd never be seen. When Rosie was young, she had not been so shy. She worked with her hair swooping over one eye and made fine inventions for uncles and aunts, a hot dog dispenser and helium pants. The uncle she loved most was zookeeper Fred. She made him a hat to keep snakes off his head, from parts of a fan and some cheddar cheese spray, which everyone knows keeps the pythons away. And when it was finished, young Rosie was proud, but Fred slapped his knee and he chuckled out loud. He laughed till he wheezed and his eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who stood there, embarrassed, perplexed, and dismayed. She looked at the cheese hat and then looked away. "I love it," Fred hooted. "Oh, I truly do." But Rosie Revere knew that could not be true. She stuck the cheese hat on the back of her shelf, and after that day kept her dreams to herself. And that's how it went until one autumn day, her oldest relation showed up for a stay. Her great-great-aunt Rose, who was a true dynamo, who'd worked building airplanes a long time ago. She told Rosie tales of the things she had done and goals she had checked off her list one by one. She gave a sad smile as she looked to the sky. "The only thrill left on my list is to fly. But time never lingers as long as it seems. I'll chalk that one up to an old lady's dreams." That night, as Rosie lay wide-eyed in bed, a daring idea crept into her head. Could she build a gizmo to help her aunt fly? She looked at the cheese hat and said, "No, not I." But questions are tricky, and some hold on tight, and this one kept Rosie awake through the night. So when dawn approached and red streaks lit the sky, young Rosie knew just how to make her aunt fly. She worked and she worked till the day was half gone, then hauled her cheese copter out onto the lawn to give her invention a test just to see the ridiculous flop it might turn out to be. Strapped into the cockpit, she flipped on the switch. The Helio cheese copter sputtered and twitched. It floated a moment and whirled round and round, then froze for a heartbeat and crashed to the ground. Then Rosie heard laughter and turned round to see the old woman laughing and slapping her knee. She laughed till she wheezed and her eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who thought, "Oh no, never, not ever again will I try to build something to sputter or spin, or build with a lever, a switch, or a gear, and never will I be a great engineer." She turned round to leave, but then great-great-aunt Rose grabbed hold of young Rosie and pulled her in close and hugged her and kissed her and started to cry. "You did it! Hooray! It's the perfect first try. This great flop is over. It's time for the next." Young Rosie was baffled, embarrassed, perplexed. "I failed," said dear Rosie. "It's just made of trash. Didn't you see it? The cheese copter crashed." "Yes," said her great aunt, "it crashed, that is true. But first it did just what it needed to do. Before it crashed, Rosie, before that, it flew. Your brilliant first flop was a raging success. Come on, let's get busy and on to the next. She handed a notebook to Rosie Revere, who smiled at her aunt as it all became clear. Life might have its failures, but this was not it. The only true failure can come if you quit. They worked till the sun sneaked away to its bed. Aunt Rose tied her headscarf around Rosie's head and sent her to sleep with a smile ear to ear to dream the bold dreams of a great engineer. At Blue River Creek, all the kids in grade 2 built gizmos and gadgets and doohickeys too. With each perfect failure, they all stand and cheer, but none quite as proudly as Rosie Revere. That is our time for all ages. The children can now go back to their Sunday rooms. We don't have a song now. Now it's our guest music for Bob and Mark.
All right, so every time when we gather together, we support the work of this church. We do that through our words, through our time, through our donations, and we set aside time every Sunday to collect an offering. The only difference is that as well as collecting the offering during this next song, the ushers will come forward, but they will also collect these cards that you have been writing questions on. So as Bob and Mark play this next piece, the offering will be gratefully received.
central part of our service is the time we join together as a community to mark the moments of our lives. We share with one another all that makes life bittersweet, our joys, our sorrows, all the events that mark the steps on our journey. The threads of sorrow and those of joy are intertwined in the fabric of our lives. When we are able to share those threads, they become woven together with others in our community. Our joys are celebrated and magnified, and we are comforted in our sorrows. We remember that we are not alone. We remember to give ourselves the same compassion and understanding as we give to others in this shared space. I invite you to type into the chat if you're watching on the live stream, or speak into this shared space your name or the name of another you wish to be remembered in sorrow. Natalie Lloyd. Angie. David. Tom and Sharon. Kara. Logan. The people of Hawaii. Brian from the live chat. I now invite you to type into the chat or speak into this shared space your name or the name of another that you wish to be remembered in joy. Heidi Jo. The beautiful flowers on the pulpit. Lauren. Katya. Logan. Seeing Karen. Mark and Bob. Eli. The public schools that are still working, many that start tomorrow. The life-bringing rain. We know that there are some joys and some sorrows that are yet unspoken, but are still deeply felt. Let us hold a moment of silence for everything that is unspoken. Thank you for your presence. Please now stand in body or in spirit for hymn number 83, Winds Be Still.
Good morning. My wife would have gotten a real kick out of Winds Be Still being the hymn before I speak. My name is Dr. Bob Fusen. I'm the music director here at the Unitarian Church of Lincoln. I was going to start off with a really terrible dad joke, and I decided against it, but then I saw my man Reed back here. So I've got folks in the room. I was a little concerned about coming up here to speak since Oscar's come back. He's got his, thank you, maybe. Since he's come back, he is now the Reverend Dr. Oscar Sinclair, and I wasn't sure if we could share this pulpit since it would be a paradox. Anyway. Thank you. Thank you. Totally worth it. I'll do it again every time. Before I get to Antelope Park, I want to talk a little bit about the A Street Band. Firstly, what a joy it is to play with Mark Schiffler, who is in A Street. We've done this duo thing a few times, and it's always a blast. So a hand for Mark, please, because he's great. A Street is the most fun part of my job. We get to do so many fun and silly and ridiculous things in there. We bicker sometimes, but we work really hard, and the folks that are in the band work really, really hard. And I just want to illuminate for you what that means. A couple years back, we tried to tally up what all the volunteer work would cost us if we were paying for it. And I think they abandoned that plan halfway through. So just to give you an idea, the union rate for musicians is $180 a service last time I checked. And their definition of service is a little bit different than ours. Service means any rehearsal and any performance. So that's $180 per the 10 people in A Street for every rehearsal and every performance. So just doing a little quick math in your head, we've had about 9, 10 rehearsals. We've got 2 more left, and we have the service. So that's a lot of volunteer time that the band puts in. So if we could give them a round of applause for all of the time that they put into this. It's a pretty sweet gig for me. The other thing about A Street that I want to say is for a long time, this has not been well known, but we are always looking for new members. And the reason that it's not well known is because the band got pretty big and we were running out of resources like microphones and a proper mixing board. And we didn't want to make it so there was like a rotating set of like, okay, A Street Alpha and A Street something that's different. So we haven't had those resources, and we do now. So if you're interested in A Street at all, and it doesn't matter what you play, if you play didgeridoo, we will welcome you with open arms. A Street is the place to do weird stuff, and we do it there. It's also, you may not know, family ministry. We've had so many family members in the band. If you know Roger Geary and his daughters, Skylar and Keelan, they've been in the band. And now we have Reed and his daughter AJ, who's playing viola in the band. It's a really cool experience. So please, 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 if you're interested, let us know. Every year we do this thing in Antelope Park. Started a couple years ago. Everybody loved it, so we're doing it every year. This year it is on Thursday, this coming Thursday, August 17th at 7 p.m. at the Antelope Park Bandshell. Our theme is resistance. Oscar will be speaking, and the band will be playing as we usually do. But the band is just really, really on fire right now. How many of you were at, say, the 420 service or one of the spring services? A few folks. Yeah, we've got a small but really dedicated volunteer. The band is really on fire right now. Do not miss this. It's going to be really, really good. All right, now to get to my next point, which has been a bit of a secret, a bit of a surprise. Occasionally I hear from people, when am I going to get my A Street Band shirt? When are we going to get merchandise? No voice is louder than the folks in the band, obviously. So this summer, we're going to roll out a very, very small merchandise project to see how it goes. And it won't be a shirt, because we're going to see how this goes, but we will have on Thursday A Street Band stickers. And I know this is hard for folks to see, so if you can hit that next slide. That's what the sticker looks like. If you make a donation to music at the Unitarian Church of Lincoln, any donation, $1, $5, $50, $5,000, go crazy. You get a sticker. Please come Thursday, bring a couple bucks, get yourself a sticker. We'll see how this goes. If this goes well and we can recoup what we've spent, we will try shirts. We'll try other stuff. The most important thing I want to say about this, though, is we are so appreciative of all the support that we've gotten from people. These services are usually packed. We have a good time. The band works really, really, really hard, really hard. And the best thing you can do is to show up Thursday at the band shell and support them. That's what they really want. That's what all of us really want. Just show up and participate. It's a really good time, and they've worked really hard. All right, I'll get out of your hair and turn it back over to the professionals. Thank you very much, and see you Thursday. Sorry, not quite yet. Mark and I are going to play one more tune for you, and then I'll be out of here.
All right. Well, one of the questions in here is, why do you need 4 cups of coffee to talk to this congregation? Did you sleep well last night? No, I did not. 2, this is about a quarter of the questions that I got. So there's a lot here. We're going to get through as much as we can, and hopefully by the end you'll see why coffee is necessary for these services. We also have a bonus lightning round that I'm going to set right there. Okay, starting off, what is Unitarian humanism? Nice small topic. Unitarian humanisms, plural, I think are hard to define because there are as many humanisms in Unitarianism as there are Unitarians. So I can talk about what my Unitarian humanism is, which is one of my primary theological identities. A. Powell Davies was a famous Unitarian minister in Washington, D.C. in the 1950s. And his focus of his humanism was to say that no matter what you believe about the supernatural, the thing that matters most is this life, is the person in front of you, is what the circumstances of their life is. And how will you lead a good life, not in a life to come, but here and now? Now, that is a different philosophy than atheism, right? Because it does not take a position on life after death, on God, on any of that. It says, we'll figure that out someday. What's important is humanity now. So for me, when I talk about humanism, that's the tradition that I'm speaking out of. It's also the humanism that I would say is most present in our current set of 7 principles, where we say our first principle is that each person has inherent worth and dignity. That is a profoundly humanist statement. Our 6th principle is the goal of world community. That is as mid-century humanism as you get. And our last principle is that we are all interconnected. So that all points us to each other. So humanism is constantly about who are we with each other. Next question. Transformation, a tall order. Perhaps there's more to say about preserving, showing up, survival, continuing to be even when day-to-day really sucks. Thoughts? So we talk about transformation at the beginning of every service because that's what this congregation has decided is your vision statement. That doesn't actually come from me. That came from you as a congregation. Now, I talk about transformation a lot because one of the jobs of a minister is to reflect back what the congregation says is important to them, and that's what you've told me is important to you. I will say that we had a board retreat last night, yesterday. My goodness. And one of the things that came out of that is that this is the year that we're going to revisit some of those fundamental assumptions of who we are, our mission statement, our vision statement, our covenant. Those were mostly all developed in 2016, right before I got here. They were developed in the interim period between Reverend Hudson and I. And folks who have been here for a decade might remember that the church was in a much different place in 2016 than it is now. So now is the time to really say what in here speaks to us. The world around us has changed since 2016. So what are we being called to in the world? If it continues to be transformation, great. I will keep preaching about it. If it switches to be about preserving and showing up, great. You'll hear a lot more about that from me. That's part of the conversation that is inherent in this job. What are your biggest goals for this fall, personally and for this church? Nice, another easy question. Another thing that we talked about at the board retreat was membership, was figuring out in 2023, what is the model for folks who come to this congregation for the first time and then become members? Right? There's a meme that floats around online that says, step one, sign somebody up for a committee. Step three, they join as members. Step four, profit. But you're missing those middle. This is going nowhere. This is why you write sermons ahead of time. The point is that we're gonna work on membership because we want to figure out what the needs of the community now are, as opposed to the needs of the community when we developed our current membership strategy. The other thing is justice and action. You've heard me talk about that a whole lot. I will continue to talk about that a whole lot, but I'm going to move on for the purposes of time. How to be grateful for life. Actually, there's another question that's crossed out, and then how to be grateful for life is written, and then there are 3 giant question marks. This seems like an important question. I don't know. The best answer I've found is practice. It's a lot of practice. Of in moments when you are feeling grateful for life, stop and say, okay, this is what it feels like to be grateful. How do I do this more? I don't have a great trick to get there. I just know that I know when I get there, and I know, how did I do this? Let me try and do this more. Because I am at my best self when I'm in those moments. A child, age 11, is distraught that her beloved cat will die soon. What would you say to her? I am so sorry. There's a Khalil Gibran poem that I use a lot. We use it in Joys and Sorrows sometimes, that goes, your joy is your sorrow unmasked. And when you are weeping, remember that you are weeping for that which has been your delight. The cost of love is grief. And that is the hardest lesson to learn. And 11 is too young to learn it. But it is a necessary lesson of life. The cost of love is grief. And so all of that grief that is so hard in the moment, that is so just earth-shattering, is the other side of the love that you have. So I'd say something like that, because 11 is young to learn that lesson, but it's not too young to understand what's happening. And then I'd ask for stories. Ask what the cat's name is, what kind of games you played, what your memories will be, what makes you laugh about your cat. Why did you choose the name you did? What is your cat's favorite kind of food? How do you as a minister offer comfort to someone whose beloved is dying? The same thing. Oscar, it seems like you are uncomfortable or don't like pastoral care. This seems like an important part of a minister's job. Please give your thoughts on this subject. Thank you. I'm not uncomfortable with it. I like it. It's actually one of my favorite parts of my job, but here's the reality. There are 300 people in this congregation. I had 8 one-on-one meetings in the last week, in 4 working days during the week. Those ranged from people talking about their marriages, to people talking about mental health troubles, to people trying to find housing. It is a deep and important part of my job. 300 people is right at the limit of what one professional can handle. It's probably past that limit. Because I know for all of those meetings that I take, there are ones that I cannot, because there are only so many hours. 8 meetings, and that doesn't include sermon prep, that doesn't include administration, and that doesn't include planning for the coming year. A sermon takes about 20 hours to write every week. So my question back to the congregation, because this is a question that has come up a couple times, is what can we do as the Unitarian Church of Lincoln to hold that piece of our collective ministry? You are just too big for it just to be me. We've launched lay pastoral care a couple times, but we haven't really gotten it to click yet. So how will you do this with each other? Because if it is solely on me, you are too big for me to catch everything all the time. I wish that wasn't the case. A minister can handle the church that I was in London. I never felt bad about falling short in pastoral care. There were 15 members. I was there at every event. Every time they said I need to talk, we had a time. But right now, I just checked my calendar. I had about 30 hours of meetings last week. Meetings, not work. So let's figure that one out together. This one then flows from that. What's the best part of your job and what's the most difficult part of your job? The best part of my job is meeting with people, is sitting in my office with a cup of tea, listening to somebody's story. When I was going to seminary, I reached out to my great aunt, who's a retired Methodist minister, and I asked her why she spent her whole career doing this thing. I had just joined the board of trustees in Baltimore, and when you join the board, you learn all the really challenging things that happen in a church. So I was reaching out to my aunt to say, like, tell me something good about this job. And she said the thing that has always kept me in ministry is that you get invited into the most important and tender moments in people's lives. You get to be there, not just on the big ones, birth, marriages, and deaths, but also the moments where they're sitting in a room trying to figure out what something meant in their lives. And it is the honor of a lifetime to be welcomed into that space. So that's the best part of my job. It is also the most challenging part of my job. Because I'm a human being. So 8 pastoral care meetings this week. You might imagine that at least a few of those people were in deep crisis. Finding a way to hear that, be fully present to it, and then go home and play with my 5-year-old is hard. That's hard, and it's getting harder the longer I'm here, mostly because I know you know. You aren't strangers, you are people that I have known and loved for years. And so when I sit and one of you is in crisis, that is a friend, somebody I have known a long time, and it's really hard to just put that down. And there are a lot of you. And as Natalie Fenimore would tell me, that's the job. That's just the job. But it also contributes to that earlier question, right? Because I have to be fully present in that moment, and then I have to move on to budgets, or I have to move on to playing with my kid, or I have to move on to the finance committee meeting that's happening right after the church service today. And I have to be able to make that distinction. So sometimes it's going to look like I walk out of a pastoral care room walking into a budget meeting and not being particularly talkative. That's usually me trying to get out of the headspace of being compassionate and empathetic in that room and into how are we going to fund religious education in the coming year. It's also really hard because, to go back to that humanism question, we don't have any easy answers in pastoral care in Unitarian circles. God, I wish we would sit down in my office and somebody would say, Oscar, I'm having this huge problem, what do I do? And I say, aha, let me pull out my handy dandy UU, This Is How the World Works book, and we'll look it up together. That is not part of our tradition. And so most of my job then is just being present and asking questions. And then constantly wishing I had better answers. All right, a little bit lighter question. Who is a Unitarian Universalist historical figure we should know more about? So I was on sabbatical last spring, and I was in England, and one of the invitations that I got was to come spend some time in the archives of Harris Manchester College at Oxford. And while I was there, I learned about a fascinating person named Sidney Spencer. Sidney Spencer was the minister of the Liverpool congregation in the 20s and 30s. And while he was at Liverpool, he was one of the most outspoken pacifists in England in the aftermath of the First World War and in the lead up to the Second World War. He lost friends for it. His personal papers, which I went through, are just full of rejections. That's what he kept, was speaking engagements that he'd been rejected from because he was a pacifist. And then this strange thing happened where in the 1940s, Harris Manchester was taken over by the British government. They were the Unitarian seminary at the time. The D-Day landings were actually planned in the dining hall of Harris Manchester College. That's a story for another sermon. But the college eventually got control of their buildings back in 47. And then in 50 or 51, they hired a new principal of the college, so a new executive director. And the person that they hired was Sidney Spencer. And I have been through his papers, and I'm convinced that there is a fascinating story there. I haven't quite found it yet. I came home with hundreds of pages of scanned documents of his papers and newsletters from the time. But that's one of my projects for this year is to write something up on Sidney Spencer, because he would have been a contemporary with Weatherly here, and I suspect they knew each other, but I don't have anything written down yet that I can find. Okay. I have been told that sermons on Revelations and the end of days are in vogue. What's wrong with these people? Whatever happened to life's for the living, death's for the dead? So Hawaii is burning right now. There's a land war in Europe. I have no idea what the election is going to be in the coming year. If we had Revelation in our liturgy, I would be preaching from it this year. Because Revelation is not a book about the end of the world. It is a book about what happens when the center doesn't hold, when things fall apart and the falcon cannot see the falconer. That is a moment that we're in right now. And so for folks that have that as part of their tradition, I certainly get why they're going to that. You've already heard me this summer go back to mid-century existentialism multiple times. Because, no exit is basically Revelation for Unitarian humanists. That didn't land at all, never mind. moving right along. We're in really challenging times, and really it is a cliche to even say that it is a cliche that these are unprecedented times. But in moments like this, people go to the unusual texts, and that's one of them. Oh boy. Okay, so we're going to stay a couple minutes late because I'm going to try and get through just a few more of these. What does use of items, stories from another culture, Buddhist story, passage from Bhagavad Gita, reference to Omaha Indians, when does that become appropriation, and when is its use appropriate appreciation? This is a question that we get a lot. So I'll say two things. One is that this question usually comes up in the context of worship. And next month, we are doing a big adult ed thing on how we plan and how we think about worship. It's Tuesday nights in September, 4 sessions. If you are interested in more about this question, please come to that. We'll talk about it as part of it. The second piece is that for me, the key to the difference between appropriation and appreciation is relationship. I know I can speak for my tradition. My traditions being humanism, the Methodism that I grew up with, and probably existentialism as distinct from humanism. I am married to somebody who comes from the Jewish tradition. And so when I speak out of that tradition, I know that if I get it wrong, I'm going to go home and my wife is going to be like, well, you botched that. Don't do it again. But that's really important. That's really important because that's what prevents us from using the other as an object for our learning rather than the center of their own story. So with something like the Bhagavad Gita, which has been in the news because it is what Oppenheimer said, I don't have that relationship. I've read the Gita in translation once through, but I don't understand the metaphors. I certainly don't speak Sanskrit, and I'm not in regular relationship with anybody for whom that is a central religious text. So if I preached out of the Bhagavad Gita, it would be for the benefit of me and us, but not taking it on its own terms. This is a tough distinction to make, but it's a really important one because our tradition in Unitarianism has put such an emphasis on pluralism for so long that we've gotten pretty used to pulling things from different religious traditions. And what we've been told in the last 20 years is that a lot of the groups that we pulled those traditions from are pretty pissed at us. For instance, it was very, very popular when I was a kid to do Day of the Dead services in Unitarian spaces. That was true all the way through my internship as a way to mark the memories of those who have died in the last year. We would build an ofrenda at the front of the sanctuary in Long Island. And then several of my colleagues who are ministers, several of my colleagues who are religious educators, and lay people across the denomination said, you know, we've hated that you've done this for 30 years. It feels like using our culture as Disneyland. To serve your faith journey, you're using our traditions and symbols. And that feels bad. And I hope, at my best self, my response in that moment is, oops, we'll stop doing that. And then even though I think finding a time in the fall to mark the people that have gone before and remember who we're missing and who we've loved is of central importance to Unitarianism, and that's what that was doing in our tradition. So then that becomes, how do we make it work? For me, I've said, well, I grew up in humanist and Unitarian circles. It was the name of all half of Unitarian churches from the 19th century. It was All Souls. And so let's put together an All Souls Day, because that is authentically from our tradition. It serves a similar function, and it is using our own tradition to do this thing rather than borrowing the symbols of somebody else's tradition. It is a growing edge for Unitarians. It's really, really hard. We still get it wrong a lot. And maybe we've edged too far into the away from pluralism, but we've done that in order to stop offending people. And not just offending. It is to feel like your core beliefs are being used by somebody else for their benefit, not for yours, is a really challenging thing. It's something that it's a position I never want to put anybody in. So that's why. That's also why you hear a lot about humanism, a lot about the Jewish tradition, a lot about the Christian tradition when I'm preaching, because those are the ones that I come out of. One of the ways to diversify that pool is by getting lots of different people from different traditions behind this pulpit. That's why we do this thing like September, where we're doing worship planning to bring more people into this pulpit. Okay, there's a couple more questions, but we'll leave those off. Quick lightning round. What is your most happy-making guilty pleasure song that you turn to cheer you up? I am a child of the mid to late 90s, and so it's ska. It's ska. If anybody in here knows the band Real Big Fish, there's one. Okay, great. Ska, yes, with a fedora, with lots of trumpets and a guitar. No. If you ever want to be happy, go listen to Sell Out by Real Big Fish. I promise you'll be grinning by the end of it, and then you will laugh when you remember this conversation. What kind of English food have you continued to enjoy here in Nebraska? There is a Scottish soft drink called Iron Brew, which is like caffeinated cream soda. It's bright orange. It's called Iron Brew because it's rusty. The color comes from an iron oxide. It's delicious. They have it at the little English store. Stacy is shaking her head. It's delicious. They have it at one store in Nebraska, and I was very excited to find it. All right, why does it take 4 cups of coffee to face the congregation, or will it take 6 cups next Sunday? I hope I've already answered that question. I hope that's more obvious. Okay, with that, having kept you a couple minutes late, we'll move into our closing hymn, and I'll say that this closing hymn is not going to be found in your hymnal, because this hymn is from this hymnal, which is the British Unitarian hymnal. So, Bill, would you mind playing it once through instrumentally, and then we'll come in on the second time through. You'll recognize the tune.
And there'll be 2 verses, right?
There'll be 2 verses, I'm reasonably sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, there are 2 verses, so we'll play it through once, and then we'll come in.
Okay.
So we'll play it through 3 times. We'll play it through once instrumentally, and then sing the 2 verses.
And it's a substantial hymn.
It is a substantial hymn. All right. But if you would, please rise in body or in spirit. One thing that I forgot to mention in introducing that hymn is that one of the reasons that we picked it is that school starts tomorrow. So if you have kids in school, good luck. I'm saying that for myself as much as anybody else. For everybody else, know that all the parents in this room are probably are preparing for that to happen. I also love that hymn, so we're going to sing it again next week as the opening hymn and hopefully get it into our heads a little bit, because I'd love it to be in rotation here.
Meanwhile, listen to Jupiter from Holst's The Planets.
Yes, the tune is Jupiter from Holst's The Planets. So if you want to get that tune in your head, that's where it comes from.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, or Thaxted is the hymn tune, but that's harder to find. With that, go in peace, go in kindness, and go in joy. Amen.